Right now, though, about this 24-year-old woman who's facing very serious health consequences after an accident exposed her to a flesh-eating bacteria. Her name's Aimee Copeland. There she is. She fell and cut her leg while ziplining over a Georgia river. Now, the bacteria caused her wound to become infected, and it's attacking her body tissues now. Doctors have amputated her leg and part of her abdomen, and yet Aimee's parents say her recovery is nothing short of a miracle.
We really don't see the suffering side of it. We see the miraculous survival. When we told her how long she had been at the hospital, I mean, her eyes just widened in horror. She goes, "I've got to work on my thesis." After we assured her of that, her eyes grew big again, and we couldn't understand what she was saying, and so we called the nurse in, who was a little better at lip reading, and her nurse looked at her lips and looked at us, and she said, "I think she's saying job." And I asked her, I said, "Aimee, are you worried about losing your job?" And she nodded her head.
You heard Aimee's dad there say the family looks past the suffering and focuses on Aimee's accomplishments, as small as they may be. So you might be wondering, how does a family stay so positive in the face of such a frightening illness? I want to bring in clinical psychologist, Miss Paula Bloom.
Hey.
Paula, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
You know, we know that this disease attacks the body, but psychologically, on some level, this has to be crushing, you would think, because here's this family. 1 minute, they've got a healthy child. Now they've got a multiple amputee, wondering what the future holds. I'm curious, how do you help people cope with something as severe as this?
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. So much of how we experience life is based on how we think about life and what our perception is. And this is ultimately the thing you had no control or power over. There's nothing worse than being in a situation, either your child being sick or your body being attacked and not much you can do. Mm-hmm. The thing you can have some degree of control over is how you view it. I love what the family just said. This shows you that it doesn't really matter so much what happens to you, it's how you experience it and what you choose to do with it. Mm-hmm. Some person gets injured and says, "I'm just so grateful I'm alive." And another person says, "Oh, I can't live because I'm missing my leg." So much of it is how we think about the world. Very, very important.
Well, even, family members have even said that doctors have used the words astonishing, confounding, mind-boggling to, describe her recovery here. So I'm wondering, how does our mental state, how influential is our mental state to how we can actually recover physically?
It's huge. It's huge. I used to work in an oncology unit, and I would see the impact and the power of the mind, because there's been a lot of scientific research that supports the idea of prayer and how that affects the body, the idea of positive thinking and how that affects the immune system. But it's also important to honor any negative feelings. If you're feeling sad, one of the problems with this positive thinking stuff is that people feel guilty if they're not positive every minute of the day. It's like you're going to feel what you're going to feel.
So we have permission to give ourselves a break.
There's nothing wrong with you if you have a negative feeling. It just means you're human. Welcome to the club, right? But this idea of being able to then recognize what you're feeling and then make a decision and a choice of where do I want to focus my mind. The mind is a magnifying glass. Whatever you focus on gets bigger. Focus on the problems, focus on the despair, that gets bigger. Focus on the optimism. My favorite definition of optimism is this. It's believing that the best outcome isn't just possible, but it's probable. Sometimes people think that somehow being negative makes you a realist. Oh, that's too naive.
Yes.
Why is being negative any more realistic than being positive? Makes no sense to me.
Because you don't know. Because we don't have control and we have no idea.
That's right.
And that brings to mind one last point I want to touch on. How do you filter, not necessarily politically correctly, but how do you filter people in your lives who don't have that same positivity that you might need in a given moment?
Oh my gosh. Actually, I know there's a great book. It's called The Law of the Garbage Truck. This guy, David Pillay, wrote this book. He was a businessman, but he studied. And he talks about how to not let people dump on you. It's a really great book. And a lot of it has to do with not getting sucked in. If you're trying to convince people of things, you have to take a step back and say, why am I trying to convince them that things are good? Mm-hmm. What's the point? You have a finite amount of emotional energy. You've got to decide where to spend it. You've got to decide. And who you surround yourself with, that's a really good point, is so, so key.
Because that can make a difference to how you see yourself and how you see situations.
That's right. And sometimes your filter's working well, and you're able to filter it out. Other times you're hungry and tired and stressed, and it doesn't work as well. So now you know when your filter's working well, you can surround yourself a little more with those people. When you're feeling a little stressed, it might be a time to make better choices about who you hang out with.
So important, yeah, to really be tuned into what you're feeling inside. Paula, thank you so much. Paula Bloom, by the way, she's got a new book out. Just look it up on Amazon.
Oh,
Paula
thank
Bloom,
you.
BLOOM, just so you know.
Thank you, Christi.
Okay.